Hello, my friends. In this video, I'm going to tell you about a internal family systems spirit clearing session that I had today. Internal family systems is a type of therapy that is gaining widespread popularity because it's so powerful, gentle, and effective. It's also called IFS, by the way. In that system, the therapist guides the client inside to talk to different parts of our own psyche, because our psyche is composed of many different parts, many different voices. As you may have noticed, when you want to go exercise, but then there's another part of you that wants to remain on the couch and watch a movie. So there's two parts of us that have these conflicting desires. Well, there are many more than just two. And over the years, IFS therapists started to realize that not only was our own psyche composed of different parts, but there were also these strange parts, these strange voices that they would interact with inside of the client that didn't seem to be a part of the client's own psyche. They started to call those parts unattached burdens. That was one of the names that they gave them, which is kind of an awkward name. In a more traditional setting, we would call those unattached burdens spirit beings. Spirit beings that have attached to a human and are attempting to influence us in some way. And if it's a negative spirit being, then it's attempting to influence us in a negative way. In my spiritual journey, I became aware that we all seem to have some of these beings trying to influence us, and that they cause a lot of problems. They steer us away from what we're really supposed to be doing in life. They steer us into painful situations. They steer us to close our heart and to give up hope and to disconnect from people and to do the wrong thing. And it makes us unhappy, and it makes other people unhappy, and it makes society unhappy. So it's been this new renaissance in my spiritual journey after 40 years. I began it 40 years ago to find this modality that's helping me to explore this particular side of my psychology and to bring healing to it. And I'm working right now with a really wonderful therapist in England. We're doing Zoom calls. She's a level 3 IFS trained therapist and has a lot of other certifications. She's very experienced and very good. And of course, she's very careful not to mislabel a part of my own psyche as something else. She's extremely careful about that, almost to a fault. Let's see if I can take these glasses off without getting blinded. Probably not. So anyway, so here's the session that happened today. It was pretty intense. It started off when she asked what I wanted to work on. I said that I'm feeling some frustration with this tendency in me to not meditate, not work on my channel, to not exercise, to not do these things that I know are in line with who I really am and are in line with my life mission, are the things that make me happy and feel good about myself. Whenever I go to do something like that, it's a bit of a struggle inside. It's like there's this, well, there is, or there was, a voice that tries to persuade me not to do those things. It tries to persuade me to, like I mentioned earlier, sit on the couch and watch a movie instead of meditating or exercising, to divert into some other activity other than working on my channel, which is my vocation right now. This voice inside of me that's always trying to sort of gently seduce me away from what I'm supposed to be doing, I just became really frustrated with it because it's tiresome to always have to fight against this. And another resistance I had, which I told my therapist about right away in my session this morning, was I didn't want to do this session. I didn't want to look at whatever it was inside of me that was causing me to divert off my path. There was resistance to looking at it. So, of course, she asks me to look at it. And I turn my attention inside, and I feel right away that, it's a voice that is sort of comforting, sort of gentle, kind of seductive, kind of soothing, as it sort of gently tries to convince me to go off my path. Don't do that, Ellis. Do this instead. That's hard. That's going to feel bad. This will feel good. Come on over to this side. Do this instead. Can you kind of hear how sort of gentle and comforting and sort of sweet that voice is? Well, she directed me to look at it directly, and when I did, it instantly changed into a mass of rage, just pure rage. And it was shocking to me how quickly it shifted from that soothing, comforting voice to complete rage. I realized that soothing, comforting voice that it usually talks to me with is a mask. It's not what it really is. It's a technique that it's using to try to influence me. But what it really is a massive rage. What I could see as I looked at it more closely is that it was enraged with me. As I felt into that voice, I could see that there was no positive intention in it for me. It was pure malevolence towards me. What it said when I looked at it right in the beginning is it said, "I will crush you," referring to me. I shared that with my therapist. She asked me, how did I feel about this enraged voice? Was there any part of me that had feelings about it? And so we identified a part of me that was very worried about it, was keeping its eye on that enraged voice. And so we worked with that worried part, and we got it to kind of take a break and step back so that we could work with this enraged part. And she asked if there was any other parts, and there was a part that I nicknamed the cop. He was like a policeman who was tracking this enraged part, was also very focused on keeping his eye on it, keeping aware of it, and trying to mitigate the damage that it does. And he said that he's been chasing this thing for so long, and he wants to, I didn't say this to my therapist, but the cop showed me like a sledgehammer. He wanted to take a sledgehammer to this enraged mass of malevolence. He wanted to kill it. He was exhausted by it. He says that he's always chasing it, that it's very tricky, that it's always changing its form and trying to deceive and gaslighting and manipulating and shifting its appearance, and it just keeps coming back. And he also said that he's exhausted because nobody believes him. Like there's no one around to help, that he's been dealing with this for decades, that I have been to so many different therapists and healers, but no one's helped him with this. He's been all alone, like the lone cop chasing this diabolical criminal. So we got the cop by my side, but he kind of gave up trying to control the situation and let me step in and the therapist step in to work with this massive enraged malevolence. Therapist asked if there was anyone else concerned in my system, any other part of my psyche that was concerned. And I saw that there was a group of small children. And I saw them in a dark room, and they were hiding behind a couch. That's the image I got. And in the darkness, I could only see their wide eyes, the whites of their eyes, because their eyes were really wide, and they were really scared. They called it the monster. They were scared of the monster. My therapist asked me to check in with them and see if it was okay with them if they stepped back so that we could work with the monster. And they were like, absolutely, please do. just go somewhere else and do it. They were totally happy for someone else to come in and take this monster out of the room, away from them. And by the way, interestingly, the imagery I was getting was of a house that I lived in when I was around 3 years old that was a 100-year-old farmhouse back then. And so it's like a 150-year-old farmhouse now. And I used to see, I'm going to call them ghosts because I don't know what else they would be. I used to see things with my open eyes in that house. Blobs of grayish light that would just move and float around the house at nighttime. They would scare me, and they had a presence about them. I sensed awareness in them. I sensed an intelligence, but they weren't comforting. They were scary to me as a very young kid who slept in a crib. That's the house that I was seeing in my mind's eye this morning as I was contacting these different parts of my own psyche. There was one other part that was worried about the monster, and so we got her to step back as well. It was a feminine part of my own psyche. And then we went to contact this enraged part again. And as soon as we were done dealing with all the other parts and we were going to turn our attention to the enraged malevolence, it like vanished. I said, well, now that we're ready to talk to it, it's gone. And she said, do you still feel a thread to it? And I said, yeah, I do. And so when I looked at the thread, I followed that thread with my attention inside, and I came back to the being, and I saw that it had camouflaged itself. Like if you ever seen a video of an octopus that can change its skin color to match its surroundings, or like a chameleon, but octopuses do it even better. It was like that. It was frozen against a background, and it had changed its appearance to look exactly like the background, and it was just staring at me, completely still, hoping I wasn't supposed to see it. But I did see it, and as soon as I saw it, insanely enraged again. And because I could see that it knew what we were trying to do. We were trying to get it out of my system. And it did not want to leave my system. So it went into just pure rage. There were moments where I saw so vividly what it looked like. Just its face and its hands. And it looked like, demon isn't really the right word. It looked reptilian in nature, but it was, it looked more sci-fi than horror movie. If that makes any sense, it probably doesn't. It had huge claws, huge knuckly fingers, dark skin, exaggerated, aggressive-looking features, and it was just literally spitting rage. I told the therapist it's like a cornered raccoon that's just hissing and growling and baring its teeth and trying to look as scary as possible. At this later point in the session, when I saw it very vividly, it just looked like, I don't know, man, like a dragon, like a evil reptile dragon, I guess is what you could say. So my therapist was getting me to gently inquire into what this being was. She wasn't coming in with guns blazing, because that's not the IFS way. She was coming in very gently. It might sound paradoxical because we've been taught by movies and by various religions that we're supposed to come in with swords and pitchforks to kill the evil entity, but that's not how IFS works. They work with love and gentleness, and I want to tell you, I'm seeing more and more as I'm exploring this. That's what makes it so powerful, is that it's coming in with love instead of anger and hate and violence, because these things love to get into a fight with you. They prefer to stay out of your awareness, but if you become aware of them, then the next best thing is to get you fighting them and being afraid of them and stuff. So anyway, she asked me to ask it, are you a part of me? And that's a standard question that an IFS practitioner will ask you to ask at this stage. And the thing was just laughing at us at this point. It laughed at us in a mocking way. It knew what we were up to. And so when my therapist asked me to ask it, "Are you a part of me?" it laughed again, sarcastically, and said, "No." It did it in a way that was to say, "You're going to ask me if I'm a part of you, and I'm going to say no. That's the stupid process you want to do with me. I already know what you're doing." That was the meaning that it communicated with me when it went, "No." Like, roll my eyes. Y'all are so stupid. I think that's pretty common also, that mocking attitude of human beings are so incredibly stupid and weak and powerless, and you can't do anything against us, the great, powerful, and negative entities or whatever. My therapist asked me to just become curious about the entity, not to change it or attack it or try to psychotherapy it or anything else, but just to be curious and to extend a little bit of curiosity towards it. Because she asked me, how do I feel about it? I said, I'm curious. I mean, part of me knows that this is not something that should be in my psyche. This should not be whispering sweet nothings to me. This is not a healthy thing for me to have in my mind. But I'm also curious about it. So she asked me to extend curiosity to it. And then she asked, how did it react? And the curious thing was, when I showed it some curiosity, it de-escalated its rage a little bit. It wasn't expecting me to do that. It was a little bit confused, a little bit taken aback that I was actually curious about it. She asked me to extend a little bit more curiosity, and so I did. And then she asked, what is its real place? Where does it really belong? Because we know it doesn't belong in Ellis, in me. So she asked it, what is its real place? And that's when I saw that it was utterly terrified to leave me. In its mind, it was either me or this black, empty void that seemed to stretch on forever. And the void was terribly cold. I was a source of warmth, which, this is all new to me, guys. It saw me as a source of warmth. I'm not talking about emotional warmth. It was like temperature, warmth. And it was grasped onto me with these giant, gnarly claws. It grabbed onto me and it was clutched and holding me onto me with all of its might, because if we sent it away from me, it thought it would go floating off into a bitterly cold void that went on forever. And the cold was painful. It was bitterly, torturously, painfully cold. I was a source of warmth, and so it was clutched onto me, but I could also see that it hated me. And it was such this weird paradox that it wouldn't leave me, but it hated me. It hated my guts with every cell of its being. And I think, and I'm not totally sure, I think it hated me because I was warm and it wasn't. That I had this warmth that I took for granted and didn't even know was valuable and didn't even seem to care about. But to it, that warmth was the most precious thing in the universe. And it despised me that I had that warmth and it didn't. And it just wanted to destroy me. But it also was terrified to lose me. And can you imagine what a sad frame of mind that must be for a being to be in? How sad. Now, I want to point out that I don't know if it was telling me the truth when it showed me this, that I was a source of warmth in a black, bitterly cold void. I don't know if that was actually true. It did show me that very clearly, so I know it was, I feel certain that it was communicating that to me, but I don't know if it was lying or not. It might have been lying. It might have been a tactic to get me to feel sorry for it. But I didn't feel sorry for it because I saw how much it hated me. Then my IFS therapist did something unusual. I thought we were about to send this being into the light, which is a common IFS technique at this point when you've identified something that seems very clearly not a part of your own system, but is there in a malevolent way. You eventually send it into the light or offer it to go into the light, and you try to heal that thing. And I've done that in a few other sessions now, and I can tell you that even these very scary beings sometimes do agree to return into the light, and when they do that, they transform very quickly from scary looking, malevolent horror movie type beings into something that resembles a normal looking being that has a heart and has kindness and a conscience and all that stuff. They transform very quickly, and as they rise up into the light, they transform more and more until they're beaming with light, and they go back into the light. I've had that happen with other clearings, and I thought my therapist was about to do that or guide us there, but instead she did a very interesting thing. She guided me to look at what part of me was getting something from this negative being. I found what looked like a very young part of my psyche, very early childhood. It was like an infant, and I saw that this being was feeding it something that sort of resembled milk, like mother's milk. The thing was, I could see that the mother's milk was tainted. It wasn't nutritious milk. It was some kind of fake milk. And there was a scared, lonely child part of me that when this being approached me and offered me what seemed to be comfort and gentleness and softness and nourishment, that I took it. I do know that my mom didn't breastfeed me when I was a child, and I know that my connection with my mom wasn't really there in the beginning of my life. She's admitted that she didn't feel connected to me and didn't feel like being my mother in the beginning, and that it took some time before she fell in love with me and then was happy to be my mother. But in the very beginning of my life, that's not how she felt, and I don't have any judgment against her for that, and I also don't take it personally. She didn't know me yet, so how could I take that personally? I strongly suspect, and I've seen pieces of this, that as an infant, I was looking around for someone to be that mother to me, to be the nurturing, comforting, safe source of nourishment. And it looks like from this session that this being, because there was no one else there, and I was looking, this being had stepped in and assumed the guise, the costume of a nourishing mother who'd be like, "Oh, it's okay. I've got you. Just listen to me. Here's some milk. Drink the milk." But the milk wasn't love. It wasn't mother's milk. In fact, at this point in the session, I kept getting these weird feelings of nausea. But the weird part about them was it almost felt like there was a separate being inside of my body that was nauseous, rather than it was me that was nauseous. It wasn't like my body was nauseous, but it was like there was another body inside of my body that was nauseous. And I know that sounds really weird, but I kept feeling this part of me being nauseous, like intensely nauseous, but it wasn't making me feel like I was going to throw up. So I saw that it had been feeding me this gross stuff. It was really quite gross. At one point also, I saw that it had kind of like a biofilm around it. You know, there are some microorganisms that hide when they invade our physical body. They hide from our immune system by covering themselves in a biofilm. That our immune system, like our T cells and white blood cells and stuff, it'll come up and see that biofilm, and it won't realize that there's a pathogen underneath it. And so it'll go on about its business and not kill this invader in our body that is trying to harm us. I saw that this entity had kind of like this ability to put a biofilm around it or to disguise itself. And it was like this membrane that it could create around itself, as it gave me this false comfort, false nourishment. Instead of kicking out this entity, we did a healing on this part of me that had been drinking the fake milk from this entity. My therapist asked what that part of me needed. And at that point, I saw that part of me had both of its hands, in my mind's eye, it had both of its hands on me, like the real Ellis, the self of Ellis. It had its hands on me. It was like holding on to me for comfort, half hugging me because it wanted to be close to me. And when I asked it what it needed, it said, I just need to be close to Ellis. This is my real place. And I saw it kind of merge into my body, like come into my body and just become a part of my body. My therapist asked, how did it feel that this part had come into my body? And it felt like a layer of wisdom had come into my body. And the wisdom was coming from the experience that this part of me had in life. In its existence, it had gathered experience, which was wisdom. And now it had merged into me. And it's like I had now available to me that layer of wisdom, which was like a lens that contained information. And I saw that there were other layers of wisdom from other parts who had gathered experience and wisdom. And so it just added this cool lens to my mind, I guess you could say. The therapist asked me to check in with these other parts. The worried one was collapsed on the ground, crying with relief. She was like, I've been working so hard to try to keep the system safe and keep my eye on this creature. And now that we have disconnected from it, she didn't say these words, but I just understood that this is what was happening for her. Now that we've disconnected from this dragon-like creature, I'm so relieved that I just collapsed to the ground and I'm crying tears of relief. And then we checked in on the cop who had wanted to bash this thing with a sledgehammer and had been chasing it and was so weary from chasing it. It was really happy and it gave me the thumbs up. Good work. I didn't know why everyone was so happy because I didn't know that we had really done something that amazing, but everyone was really stoked. We checked in on those scared little kids hiding behind the couch. They were jumping up and down, screaming with joy. And I was shocked to see how everyone was so happy. Because again, I thought we had to send this being away into the light in order for it to be done. And I said that to my therapist, and she said, well, sometimes when we heal the part of us that was in relationship with the negative entity, that's all it takes, that the entity just moves off on its own and that the work is done. She said, we might find that we still need to do some work on that in our next session, but we're running out of time for this session. But it's possible that we're all done with that entity. And that's why my whole system was kind of rejoicing. She asked me, since we had to wrap up the session, was there any last thing I wanted to say? And the words came really strong out of my heart. This house is now blessed. In my mind's eye, I was seeing that old farmhouse that I lived in when I was 3, which was so scary and creepy. And there was like a part of me saying very joyfully and loudly, this house is now blessed. And it's like, I don't know if they were talking about my memories of the house, my internalized image of the house. I'm guessing that must be what they mean. But it really felt like somehow we had blessed the actual house back in Pennsylvania on the other side of the country from where I am right now. I don't know though. At the very least, it was like we blessed my memories of the house, the way that I was carrying that house in my psyche. It was now a blessed place instead of a scary, creepy place. So that was really cool. And I came out of that session feeling so much joy. I went and put on some really fun music and I just felt overjoyed when this work was done. Later in meditation, I tried to contact that being and see if I could get him to go into the light. It didn't look like it wanted to go into the light, and I tried to send it into the light anyway. I visualized the light coming down from some higher realm of love and goodness, acting like a tractor beam which would pull this entity into the light. But when he got to the doorway, the threshold, he couldn't go through. I didn't understand that. And the irony is I just wrote this article about how there's no gate on heaven. But if what I was seeing was correct, they couldn't let him through. There was a gate, and they weren't letting him through. I could see that he didn't want to go, was one part of it. But also there were beings not letting him through. And when I asked them why, their answer was something like, because he hasn't transformed. They couldn't let him, as he was right then, enter their realm. That he would have to transform before he could enter into that vibratory dimension. Again, I don't know if that's true. This is subjective. This is what I'm seeing in my mind's eye. And I always take that with a grain of salt because I'm human and fallible. But it did have a kind of logic to it that they couldn't let him in as long as he was an enraged dragon being. And that's when I realized, yeah, the other times when I sent these negative entities into the light, they transformed immediately as they started to move towards it and became something heartfelt. And so when they went into the light, they were already vibrating with the light. They were already feeling love and joy before they even disappeared into the light. They had transformed as they approached it. Well, this being that I tried to send into the light today, it didn't transform because it didn't want to go. And honestly, I feel compassion for it, I feel sad. I feel sad that it is so alone. In my next session with this therapist, I might try to spend some time trying to bring healing to this being. There's a way to talk to them about their state. Their state is deeply, deeply, deeply unhappy. They are quite literally in hell, at least in their own mind. They are in a hell. It seems like most of them believe that they must be there forever and ever. And this being saw me as this way of lessening its suffering by just being close and absorbing some of my warmth. That somehow lessened its suffering a little bit. So I do feel compassion for this being. Doesn't mean I would let it back in. We're done with that. No more fake milk. And what that means for me is when I hear that tempting voice, just divert to this soothing pseudo-comfort. That's expired soy milk, my friend. That's not mother's milk. So yeah, that was my session report. I hope it teaches you something, maybe connects some dots for you, validates something you've experienced but never heard anyone else say. I think we need to start communicating about this. I think it's a really important aspect of human psychology. It's a missing piece that needs to come back because there is so much power and healing in understanding how this works.